To be absolutely honest, the book was birthed out of my own personal life. I've been in active pastoral ministry for about 21 years. What I've been actually doing is just researching from a medical perspective internal bleeding and paralleling that to some of the emotional bleeding that we go through. One of the things about internal bleeding from a medical perspective is that it's very, very hard to detect. There's hardly any initial signs. As you begin to lose more blood, then there can be like skin discoloration. Sometimes people become dizzy, weak. And when you get to what they call stage 4 hemorrhaging, you're at the critical stage. It basically means that if you don't receive blood or if you don't stop the bleeding, you'll actually die. I've written this book deliberately in language that is open for people whether they have faith or not, because one thing that is in common with all of us, we all know what it is to experience pain. I take people on a journey to really start to examine themselves. Most people spend very little time on self-examination, and this book is about allowing you to just look at yourself from a totally different perspective. You know, I do a lot of counseling and I realize that there are so many things that happen to people and our initial response is, well, it doesn't matter. But it actually causes damage to you emotionally. There's a term that I like to use and I call it traumatic freeze. And what happens is that when something traumatic happens to you emotionally, that part of your emotion freezes. It's like it's stuck. And it therefore can affect the way in which you see people, the way in which you enter into relationships, and how you interpret other people's actions. And the other thing that I also try and highlight is one of the most important chapters is quarantine. And quarantine means is that when you've put closure on a major part of your life, you do need a period where you're isolated. And sometimes we think, oh, you know, isolated is being selfish, but you actually need time to process your emotions.
You mentioned about emotions. So going through the process, how did you find writing it and then reading back to yourself and looking about that internal bleeding?
If I'm absolutely honest, even in writing the chapters, I realized that there were certain areas that still needed to be processed. And the reality is that the process of healing will probably last your whole life. But there are some major areas of healing that can be dealt with if you're willing.
As a writer, what were the kind of difficulties you faced in terms of like physically and mental? Because there's a big battle. Because I find when writing, there's a struggle to balance everything, but at the same time still stay in the mindset of what you're writing about.
I always would say to people, write when you're inspired. If you can even tape some of the things that are on your heart, just tape it audibly, because I think that sometimes a moment of inspiration is lost because it's not recorded.
You said something about quarantine, about the fact that when you've gone through a major emotional trauma. I've gone through that. What advice do you have for people who are addicted to the limelight, who are addicted to stuff? How do you get out of there?
I often say to people that when you go into quarantine, to do it progressively. Sometimes people leave a seminar or leave a talk like this and they say, right, I'm going to stop that relationship, I'm not going to phone anyone, and that's an emergency stop. The reality is it's effective, but it can also damage you. As you go into quarantine, do it progressively.
Yeah, just to say, I think it's about time we needed something like this, and to look at ourselves internally, if not physically bleeding, we're emotionally and spiritually bleeding. And I think this is a prominent time for, if I might say, for black people, for ethnic minorities, for women, for people with low self-esteem, confidence. It's brilliant. I wish you luck, and I hope that this will make you millions.
This book really is an expression of my heart to help people who really want to do.